After a long journey, you eventually make your way into a small town. You decide to make your way to the temple. As you arrive, you realize that it is a temple of Julianos. After entering the temple, you speak to one of its members who invites you to join. Hello and welcome to Anatomy Fiction. In today's video, we will be discussing Julianos. More specifically, why would anyone choose to worship him and why you may want to on your next playthrough. To do this, we must first go over several things, starting with who even is Julianos. So, some of the mythology surrounding Julianos, what he is known as, and what he is known for. Then, we will move on to discussing the followers of Julianos, so who worships Julianos and their practices. After this, we will discuss the teachings of Julianos and the beliefs surrounding Julianos. Finally, we will move on to discuss the various creations associated with Julianos. So let us begin with who Julianos is. So, Julianos is an Aedra, who is a member of the 9 divines. Julianos is known to be the Aedric god of wisdom and logic. However, he was not always Julianos. He was once Jhunal, a Nordic god. He would become Julianos when he fell out of favor with the rest of the pantheon. There is also the suggestion that this would occur with the merging of the imperial pantheon and the Nordic pantheon. This is why we see Julianos and not Jhunal in the main pantheon. So Jhunal is an interesting character when it comes to the old Nordic faith that some still follow or at least acknowledge. Jhunal for the Nords is believed to be the god of hermetic orders, knowledge and wisdom, with the symbol of Jhunal being an owl, which is where we see the likeliest origin for a version of Julianos worship coming from. This being over on Atmora, where they worshipped animal totems. One of these being, of course, the owl. These animal totems would eventually evolve into the Aedra, who are now worshipped. Jhunal is considered to be part of the Hearth gods, so the gods who watch over the present cycle in Nordic belief. Now, when it comes to Julianos and what he represents, to many he represents the virtues of learning, scholarship, and justice, with his domains being sorcery, alchemy, and enchantment. So based on this, why would anyone choose to worship Julianos? Julianos is considered to be the god of wisdom and logic, with his domain being over the various elements of magic. So he would appeal to those who seek knowledge and wisdom, but also those who are magic users. Julianos, or his other name, Jhunal, would also appear to some Nords who still worship the Hearth gods. So this may be why some would worship Julianos. But this is only one piece of the puzzle, not the full picture. To learn more, we should discuss the followers of Julianos. Now, to discuss the followers of Julianos, we should also discuss the followers of Jhunal, as there are still groups and individuals who follow Jhunal. So Jhunal worship has mostly waned within the Nords, however there are some groups who still worship him, and there are also groups who have historically worshipped him. An example of who has been known to worship Jhunal are actually the Nordic warriors. This being due to the belief that you must have a strong mind and be knowledgeable to get through combat, with some Nordic warriors still believing this and respecting Jhunal. There have also been individuals from both the Nords and the Reachmen that follow Jhunal. An example of this being the Archmage Ulfsild the Evergreen, who was born during the First Era. Ulfsild is said to have been mixed Nord and Reachfolk heritage, her mother being a Nord and her father apparently being a Briar Heart. Now, she was not raised by the clan she was born into. Instead, they would find her in the nest of a hagraven and snatch her from it, leading to her being raised by the clever folk in Skyrim. Now, Ulfsild had a long and complex history where she has been known to be a priestess, a talented witch, and a healer. She was known in part as the Pale's priestess of Jhunal. This she would reveal to Shalador during their first encounter, Ulfsild telling Shalador that she was who he had been searching for on his return to Skyrim. Now, not much is known about her actual practice as a priestess for Jhunal, only the fact she was one. This being up until her death, which would occur at some point in the First Era around the year 2150. We know that it occurred after this date due to a deal Shalador made with Sheogorath. This deal would see Aedra, which held a great library known as the Scholarium, along with a Mages Guild Hall, dragged into the Shivering Isles, in return for Shalador being given the Folium Discognitum. Ulfsild would be greatly weakened by her attempt to save the library, but she was not the only one affected by the deal. Shalador was also affected, with him becoming obsessed with retaking Aedra. He would ignore Ulfsild and she would leave him. But anyway, moving on. We would see another individual who would be considered rather interested in Jhunal, this being the Reachfolk warlord Vund the Stone Shaper. Vund was born at some point in the Second Era and would die in the year 582, also in the Second Era. Now, as you could potentially tell from his title, Warlord Vund, he was not the most chill guy. He was actually a mercantile agent that desired to destroy Dragon Bridge, a town in Western Skyrim. But Warlord Vund was no dunce. He was actually rather smart. He would invent an alchemical reagent known as Reach Thornfire, which was incredibly explosive and volatile. Vund intended to use this to destroy Dragon Bridge through blowing up the caverns underneath. Now, why does he matter in the worshippers of Jhunal? Well, looking at the Smuggler's Caves, more specifically in Vund's workshop, on one of the tables in this workshop has a book titled Jhunal the Rune God on top of it. Considering this book praises Jhunal and claims that warriors should also worship Jhunal, Warlord Vund could be considered a Jhunal worshipper. Now, there are also the worshippers of Julianos that should also be considered when it comes to why he is worshipped. We see Julianos present in several pantheons, the first of these being, of course, the Cyrodiilic pantheon. So, the Cyrodiilic pantheon was a fusion of the Nordic pantheon and the Aldmiri pantheon, as the Aldmiri pantheon was what the citizens of Cyrodiil had been forced to follow under the occupation of the Aelids prior to the Alessian slave uprising. Now, with this being a religion that the Imperials had followed for several generations, they would not willingly give it up. It had become part of their culture and their identity. However, the Nords who had helped them become free of their Aelid captors would not be all too willing to convert to the Elven pantheon. This would lead to Alessia combining the religions, taking attributes and archetypes from both of these religions to create the Eight, also known as the Eight Divines, this later becoming the Nine Divines with the introduction of Talos, which we know Julianos to be part of both of these. In this pantheon, Julianos is known to be the god of logic, wisdom, and the arts of magic. Along with this, he is also considered to be the Cyrodiilic god of law, literature, history, and contradiction. We also see the Bretons as worshippers of Julianos. In fact, he is considered to be a favorite of the Bretons. We see Julianos as the patron deity in several regions in Iliac Bay, including Dania, Dwynwen, and Toulon. When it comes to the religion of this region, the Bretons, like the Imperials, have the Eight Divines as they transitioned to their worship under the Alessian Empire. However, there are a few gods that are not present in the Imperial Pantheon that are also present in the Breton Pantheon. But anyway, the extra gods are not entirely relevant, as Julianos is part of the Eight Divines. The Breton belief of Julianos is similar to the Cyrodiilic one, with Julianos being viewed as the god of law, literature, history, and contradiction. In the Iliac Bay region, we would also see many temples dedicated to Julianos. These temples were known as schools of Julianos, this being due to the temples being considered educational institutions, with the schools of Julianos actually being credited with the creation of the term magica as well. This term being used to describe the power associated with performing magic. Now, their favoritism of Julianos could be due to some of the contributions of their origins, as if we look at the origins of the Bretons, they are actually from an intermixing of the ancient Nades people and the Aldmer. Now, with the Bretons, they often have a natural talent for magic. This is often attributed to the Mer part of their ancestors. With their intelligence and their skill for the magic arts, it is no surprise that Julianos is a favorite among the Bretons. Now, we also see the worship of Julianos emerging in other pantheons, such as the Red Guards. When it comes to the Red Guards worshipping Julianos, it is slightly complicated, this being due to the Red Guard society being rather fractured. So one of the main groups of Red Guards is known as the Forebears. Members of the Forebears have their own belief system, which includes Julianos. The other group, which is the Crowns, does not worship Julianos, this being due to the Crowns' religion being much closer to the ancient Yakutan pantheon, whereas the Forebears have been heavily influenced by Imperials when it comes to their religious beliefs. There would also be a rather interesting faction of followers that Julianos has, these being the monastic orders that are the keepers of the Elder Scrolls. These groups were established by Tiber Septim, most likely after the year 896 in the Second Era. This group would have existed in the Imperial City and were the caretakers and researchers of the Elder Scrolls. Along with this, these orders were dedicated to Julianos. Apart from this, not much else is known about this group. So, based on the followers of Julianos, why would anyone choose to worship Julianos? Now, when we look at the Imperials, more specifically in their beginnings with Saint Alessia, considering that the Imperials, before they were Imperials and before they had their own pantheon, they were the slaves of the Aedrids. At this time, they followed the Aldmiri pantheon, but with the Nords assisting in the removal of the Aedrid captors, this obviously had to change, but neither being willing to give up their religion would lead to the fusion of the religion. Considering that Julianos was one of the gods that emerged from this, both religions had some form of Julianos, leading to the new god emerging, thus leading to them worshipping Julianos. If we look at the Bretons, who as a race are both incredibly intelligent but are also rather talented when it comes to the use of magic, considering that Julianos is the god of wisdom and logic and often linked with magic, it makes him an obvious choice when he becomes part of their pantheon. If we also look at Warlord Wund, we see that he had a book about Jhunal, who was essentially the Nordic predecessor of Julianos. Now, the book that Wund had would encourage those who were warriors to follow Jhunal, as a warrior needs to be wise if they were to make it out of battle alive. To be successful in warfare, one needs to be able to plot attacks and plan assaults, using intel and knowledge about their enemy, being wise about what their and their foes' strengths and weaknesses are. Now, considering that Wund was able to not only plan an attack that would destroy Dragon Ridge, but this attack, if it was successful, would cost minimal lives on his side. This being due to his invention of Reach Thornfire, an alchemical reagent that was incredibly explosive and volatile, showing that Wund was a wise and incredibly intelligent warlord, not just a brute who attacks first and thinks later. So when it comes to this, the worship and worshippers of Jhunal and Julianos encourage intelligence and the use of knowledge, like we see with Wund. So with both the Jhunal and Julianos worshippers, those who worship Julianos see the pursuit of knowledge as not just a useless thing, but as a tool for success. Others, like the Scroll Keepers, would see it as a way of understanding the world around them. But this is only one part, not the full story. To learn more about this, we should discuss the teachings of Julianos. When it comes to the teachings of Julianos, we should first look at the 10 commands of the 9 divines. More specifically, command number 8. Julianos says, "Know the truth. Observe the law. When in doubt, seek wisdom from the wise." This goes along with what Julianos is viewed as being the god of. Julianos teaches his followers to look past the basics, to investigate and understand the world around them, to know their history, their laws, and to learn about their passions. If we look at this teaching along with the quote from the Sijic mage Kulian Darnizan, the power of ignorance can truly shatter mithril like glass. So with this, it hints at the idea that being ignorant is truly the most dangerous thing a man can be. By simply walking through the world without questioning, knowing, or understanding what is around us, there is no progress to be made. Everything stagnates. By refusing the truth of the universe and all around you, you stumble blindly through life. Now, with the school of Julianos, they do not view Julianos as just a god figure that they should mindlessly follow. No, they view him as a symbol of learning, logic, philosophy, and wisdom. They view scholarship as a long and difficult journey, but this journey is worthwhile and important. The school of Julianos does not tolerate those who attempt to cut corners when it comes to learning, nor do they care to educate the lazy. For those who desire to learn from the school of Julianos and see the beauty in the path it takes to learn, they do teach many things. These lessons include not only various schools of magic, but also certain languages, short blade, and lock picking. So the school provides knowledge that would be useful in navigating the world. So based on the teachings of Julianos, why would anyone choose to worship him? Well, if we look at the belief that Julianos is not a godlike figure that expects you to mindlessly follow what he instructs, instead one that encourages you to learn and to question what you know, seeking out those more wise, then this sort of belief would be rather encouraging to those who could be considered rather curious, like scholars and researchers, searching for the answers to all of life's mysteries. Julianos not only allows for the asking of questions, but encourages it. He encourages literacy and education for all in Tamriel, because knowledge is power, and the power to not blindly follow, but to understand provides those with knowledge safety. We also know that the school did not teach useless facts, but actual knowledge that could help someone when they needed it. Whether this need comes from their own prodding into places they shouldn't, like dark dungeons, or in everyday life for convenience. So the teachings of Julianos attract people who see the beauty in learning, but also the convenience that the odd skill may provide. But this is only one part of the story, not the whole picture. To learn more, we should discuss the creations of Julianos. So what are the creations of Julianos? When it comes to the items specifically created by Julianos, there is only one, this being the Shield of the Crusader. The Shield of the Crusader was created as part of the set that is now known as the Relics of the Crusader. These relics are Aedric artifacts that were made for Pellinol Whitestrake, who is also known as the Divine Crusader. He was the champion of Queen Alessia during the Alessian Slave Rebellion in the First Era. Now this set of armor, including the Shield of the Crusader, were used by Pellinol Whitestrake to take down the Aedrics and their sorcerer kings, especially that of Umoril the Unfeathered. Umoril was the favoured champion of the Daedric prince Meridia, who the Aedrics had especially aligned themselves with during the Alessian uprising in an attempt to overpower the slaves. Umoril was favoured due to the incredible power he had. With this, he would end up being the head of the Aedrics. He would also be the hardest of the sorcerer kings to defeat, which is why the relics of the Crusader armor was important. This shield specifically had the ability to reflect spells casted at the person holding the shield. This would be helpful when going up against a sorcerer king like Umoril. Now if we look at the appearance of the shield, it resembles the Chim El Adabal, this being the Amulet of Kings, the red diamond that is the symbol of the Imperials, this red diamond serving as a symbol of divine right. However, the creation of the shield is not directly related to the creation of the red diamond. Yes, they were supposedly both made by members of the Divines during the Alessian uprising, however, different members of the Divines. But they both symbolize the same thing, the Divine being willing to protect their people. Now when it comes to the creations of Julianos, we should also look at the companion of Jhunal, this being Wisewing. Now Wisewing is the mythical companion of Jhunal. Wisewing is often depicted as a barred owl, with her symbol being an owl like Jhunal. So essentially they share a symbol, or have very similar symbols, with the wearing of tail feathers from barred owls also being considered a sign of devotion to Jhunal due to his connections to owls. Now Wisewing is mostly linked to the northern regions of Tamriel and is believed to serve as a protector, especially during the Witches' Festival. During this time, Wisewing is said to caution the unwary to stay away from graveyards and witches' covens where dangers may present. So Wisewing provides protection and guidance, however not much else is known about her. So based on the creations of Julianos, why would anyone choose to worship him? The Shield of the Crusader provides protection for its user. Now although Julianos may not be considered the most battle ready when you look at the 9 divines, he still protects those who serve him, and with the use of knowledge like the book, Jhunal, the rune god, encourages the combination of the shield, knowledge and skill when it comes to battle techniques would allow success in battle. So Julianos as a god not only encourages knowledge but protects those who desire to acquire it and defend themselves against threats, like that of the Aedrics and their Daedric supporters. So based on who Julianos is, his followers, his teachings, and the creations of Julianos, we can finally answer the question, why would anyone choose to worship Julianos? Well, Julianos seems rather positive, as he is a god who does not force those who worship him to just mindlessly follow. Considering that he encourages the pursuit of knowledge and thinking, he actually encourages the opposite of mindlessly following. An example of this being that the school school of Julianos teaches the use of short blades, indicating that they encourage knowledge that can be very much put into practice, if you end up finding yourself in trouble in a dungeon or just getting mugged in the middle of the night in a random town. Now with Julianos, we also see him potentially being identified as Jhunal, so the Nordic god of wisdom. In this, we also see that there is the idea with this version of Julianos that there is a promotion of strategy in battle and war, rather than just mindless fighting. The idea that you must have a strong mind and knowledge to carry you through battle. We see this idea play through with Warlord Fund, with his creation of Reach Thornfire. With the creation of this highly explosive and volatile alchemical reagent, it would have won the war without even having to set foot on the battlefield, considering that it would have destroyed the town of Dragon Bridge without a single slash from a sword if Wund had been successful and his plans were not discovered. However, considering that Wund met his end due to the vestige and Dragon Bridge still stands, Wund was obviously not very successful. Now, considering that Julianos also participated in the creation of the relics of the Crusader, we see that he also protects those he views as worshippers in their pursuits, as long as he views them as worthy. We also see this considering that Julianos was one of the 8 divines chosen to be part of the imperial pantheon at this time, there being other gods who were not chosen and even outlawed for some time. His participation in the protection of the Alessians would lead to him being viewed as a more worthy god. So based on this, why would anyone choose to worship Julianos? Julianos and his temples provide a space to learn without fear of persecution. He does not encourage blind obedience, instead investigation and discovery. This would attract many scholars, researchers, and even mages, considering that the school of Julianos also teaches certain forms of magic. Julianos and his other form, Jhunal, encourage useful knowledge like the use of short blades, allowing for one to know how to protect themselves and fight strategically, which would also attract warriors who can to better understand the art of war. So you, yourself, may also choose to worship Julianos if you find yourself on a never-ending quest for knowledge, if you enjoy the pursuit of knowledge and the acquisition of new skills, but also if you are a researcher or scholar looking for the answer to your studies. So let me know in the comments, would you choose to worship Julianos? A special thank you to all of our Lore Archaeologist supporters, you guys help keep this channel running. And thank you to anyone who is joining our memberships. In the meantime, if you enjoyed this video, you should check out this one. It is about Stender, another member of the 9 Divines, and why anyone would choose to worship him.